Hi, my name is Dan, and this is one of those albums where I feel like I really like this list because one of the reasons that I moved to this list that I'm using, sorry, the 3,000 greatest albums of all time according to Acclaimed Music. Before that, I was had a list that I'd done my own amalgamation of two or three, not three or four lists, um, which I thought might be the arguably, vaguely, the 1,000 greatest albums of all time, and I was reviewing on a blog. And I made a switch to this list, partly because I had a lot more confidence in this list, but partly because of the 2,000 below the top 1,000 has such a richness of interesting stuff in it. Obviously, lots of stuff that I don't know, but stuff that I wanted to discover. So why not? And this is that kind of thing that you wouldn't find in a kind of mainstream list, as it were, um, because it's kind of weird and off the wall. So let's. What else can we say about it? So it's world music from Morocco, and it's performed by the master musicians of Joujouka, not to be confused with the master musicians of Joujouka led by Bakir Attar, who are a related group. I'm not sure where the demarcation is between the two. So Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones recorded this in 1968 and then touched it up in the studio. As well as cleaning it up, he added effects like, and some editing. He added some effects like phase and stuff. And initially, when I saw the title, I thought it was going to be panpipe music, and it's not. Not as what you might think of as Peruvian or South American panpipes. It's something different. It's basically North African tribal music. I think mostly it's music from ceremonies, and it's got a certain kind of trancey element to it. What else can I say? There's African drumming. There's some singing. There's some flutes. And there's quite a bit of a very shrieking reed instrument in there. There's quite a bit of trancy repetition going on. Some of the tracks are really long. There's quite a bit of call and answer stuff where you get one thing doing something and another thing responding. And in the track, there's got a lot of singing. It's basically got two groups of people singing, and they're singing the same thing back and forwards to each other. Excuse me. Some of the drum patterns I noticed would be really hard to write in Western music writing because of the way that the timing works for it, that it's not the kind of strict on the beat timing that we expect in music, and it's kind of that shape is pulled about. It's not that they're doing it wrong or the timing's out, it's that that's how the pattern is, and it's not a pattern that we would express easily on paper like that, but these things are done oral tradition that I would understand. What else can I say? So I liked the last but one track for this element. I think that was particularly interesting rhythmically. It had a 2, then 3 kind of pattern. Dun, 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 and I can't do it how they had it. This was So it was released in 1971, and it was well before the kind of 80s towards 90s boom of interest in world music, strongly influenced by Peter Gabriel at the time. But my exposure to world music, it does actually date earlier than that, but later than this, because my dad, when I was a kid living at home, my dad would listen to his music. He liked a lot of classical music, but he also liked ethnic music and tribal music and things like that. And whenever there'd be a program of it, he'd try and record it off the radio, and we'd go to kind of ethnic folk festivals, and he'd have his little portable tape recorder with him, and so he'd record anything that was like this. He would have loved this. So I was brought up listening to this sort of stuff, but not, only occasionally, not all the time. Generally, it's okay. say I'm not opposed to this kind of music. I don't like the shrieky, reedy instrument thing that dominates the first few tracks of this album. It sounds really harsh, and so I found it not an easy thing to listen to for those. I particularly like the last two tracks. The last but one track is the one with the rhythm that I described that's got singing backwards and forwards, and the last track, which is nearly 20 minutes of drumming with flutes going on, and the flutes are quite nicely played. Maybe this is closer to what you might think of as the sound of panpipes, but I'm not quite sure what instrument they are. There are some anomalies in the recordings, which are interesting, like picking up people coughing and the dog barking. It's obviously, recorded live outside, and all sorts of stuff going on there. But generally, I'd say it's a bit difficult for Western ears, partly because of the kind of very repetitive nature of it and the tranciness, partly because the recordings, obviously, with the instruments that they've got, it doesn't have the kind of sonic depth that we used to of having bass end stuff in there. It has been, considerably cleaned up in recording, but it still kind of, feels like a field recording, which is what it is. Sometimes it's very discordant, so there's some quite harsh stuff. There's stuff that just doesn't sit well with our kind of Western understanding of music. And I think the other thing is it's not really meant, this kind of music, for recorded listening. It's meant for, communal consumption in your ceremony, or just in your, whatever's going on in your village at the time. And to some extent, well, what we're doing is we're taking it very much out of that situation and putting it in our living rooms and listening to it. And, that's okay, but it might not work as well as it would do in the proper situation. So it's okay. I like the ending of it. The last two tracks, as I said, the first few tracks I found quite wearing. But there you go. It's interesting. So that's what I think. As always, please tell me what you think by typing something meaningful in, or not meaningful if you really want to, in the comments box. And that's it from me for now.